Okay, welcome to Georgia's tiered system of supports for students as we unravel the language of MTSS, RTI, and SST. My name is Launa Chamberlain, and I am an MTSS regional coach for the Georgia Department of Education. For many of us, these acronyms can often be confusing, so today I'm going to share with you how MTSS, RTI, and SST impacts all students. Today's session goals are to learn more about a multi-tiered system of supports, and that acronym you will hear me refer to often is MTSS. I'm also going to share with you some benefits of MTSS for you to consider. So I've mentioned 3 different acronyms and will be providing information how a multi-tiered system of supports, response to intervention, and student support teams differ and connect. MTSS connects academics, behavior, and whole child supports. MTSS also supports the whole child by matching interventions and supports to a child's specific needs. So many parts of a child's life improve when he or she feels healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. The MTSS umbrella approach you see here in this graphic shows how different processes are combined to meet the needs of our children. MTSS connects academics, behavior, and whole child supports to support students. And you see in this graphic the different colored braids. Not that the braids mean anything significantly by the color, but each one of these braids or processes under the MTSS framework complements each other. So if one of these braids break, then supports are weakened. And I want you to notice in this graphic that we're talking about student success for all students. So what exactly is MTSS? Well, MTSS is a multi-tiered system of supports, and we illustrate MTSS as a large system of tiered interventions that is like an umbrella framework like this. If you gather your hands, it's like an umbrella framework to encompass academics, behavior, and whole child supports. So I've now mentioned a few times that MTSS is for all students, not just struggling students. MTSS is also not the highway to special education identification, and implementing MTSS with fidelity leads to reduced special education rates. And there are many benefits of the MTSS framework. These benefits include decreased expulsion, behavior referrals, and suspension rates, also a reduction in student retention, sustained academic improvement, and increased on-time graduation rates. Decreased inappropriate special education referrals and placement rates is also a benefit of the MTSS framework. So at this time, we'd like to address some frequently asked questions about MTSS, and my colleague, Carol Carr, will be sharing some frequently asked questions where I will provide some clarification for you.
One question that we get from parents is that they just don't know if their child's school is implementing MTSS. And if they aren't, will their child still receive interventions?
Yes, Carol, your child or a child would receive interventions. If you don't know really truly if your child school is implementing MTSS or receiving interventions, just ask the school. Because in some schools, the acronyms MTSS and RTI are used interchangeably. MTSS is the framework and RTI is the process within MTSS. So your child's progress is being monitored, so instructional decisions can be made based on data to determine what level of support and interventions are needed. So let's talk about the process of RTI. Response to intervention, or RTI, is a process within the larger system of an MTSS framework, and RTI is a part of a process where teachers review data to decide how students are responding to interventions. And RTI is a process to look at a student's progress based on data so teachers and parents know how to help the student be more successful.
We have another question about RTI. If their child's school is only doing RTI or response to intervention, does that mean they aren't doing MTSS?
Absolutely not. It doesn't mean that your child's school is not doing MTSS. Some schools and some districts may not have updated their common language and use MTSS and RTI interchangeably. And so RTI is included within the framework and is how the intervention process is actually being implemented. And so RTI, as I mentioned, is how the interventions are being implemented and is the way students receive extra support, but not necessarily referred to a special education. And SST is a team and is a part of the MTSS process. So SST, or Student Support Team meetings, include an administrator, teachers, and parents. And SST members work together to make a plan to improve learning and/or behavior concerns of a student. So the purpose of SST is to recommend additional support for a student and to plan next steps.
Thank you, Launa. So we have questions about SST. What does an SST plan or next steps look like for a student?
So I mentioned earlier that MTSS is for all students, and so intervention supports are provided for all students. This includes students with and without disabilities who are showing signs of struggling. So teachers use their data to figure out the instruction needed to help students be more successful. And so sometimes students will need more practice opportunities receiving interventions, so these students might receive supports more frequently than other students. So if a student is not making adequate progress, then the SST team comes together to further examine your child's progress or lack of progress using a process to develop an SST plan based on the data and the needs of your child. So let me just demonstrate that for you. So supports and interventions are customized, I mentioned earlier, to address your child's unique needs through the RTI process within MTSS. So you notice down the center of this triangle, colored in gray, there are acronyms such as SWD, EL, and gifted. This means that students with disabilities, English language learners, and gifted students also receive supports within the MTSS framework. And so your child's teacher would collect data regularly and make changes necessary if your child is not making progress. And all students, including students with disabilities who are not making adequate progress, may need the data to be further examined. So this is where the SST comes together. They use a process to develop an SST plan that's based on data and the needs of your child. So for example, if your child is receiving supports through his or her IEP for maybe reading comprehension, but continues to struggle in math, the SST team might decide to try all possible interventions for math before referring your child for additional special education supports. And so our session outcomes were to know more about a multi-tiered systems of supports, or MTSS, and to recognize the benefits of an MTSS framework, and also to understand the purposes and differences between a multi-tiered system of supports, response to intervention, and student support teams. At this time, we'd like for you to please take a moment before we move to our question and answer session to complete the session evaluation. This evaluation will take about a minute to complete. This information is confidential, and you can type in the URL into a website browser, or it may be easier to complete the session evaluation through the QR code. Using a smartphone camera, please point the camera at the QR code image on the screen. You will then be prompted to open the link in a browser. We appreciate you and thank you for taking the time to complete this evaluation. And if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to email us. We can be reached at gamtss@doe.k12.ga.us. So the next few slides that you will see are informational slides for you so that you can get in touch with us and other opportunities to learn about MTSS. And the contents of this presentation were developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education.